Ayo! What's the deal with fandoms? They're kinda weird, right? With communities forming in social media platforms like Reddit, Tumblr, and Twitter, accessibility has never been higher to talk about your favorite characters and give unwarranted hot takes. And before you say anything, I am aware that this video is an unwarranted hot take. That fact isn't lost on me. But, you know, I don't have anything to say to that. But before we begin, I'd like to give a shout out to today's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. Wait, that's not right. HelloFresh. No, that's not right either. NordVPN. This video is not sponsored. With the rise of any piece of popular media, there comes buzz. That buzz comes in the form of posts. And with the nature of any piece of media, be it movies, TV, anime, gaming, books, fans are going to want to converse and talk and most importantly bond over the things that they like. Especially right now where people can't leave their houses and consuming media is one of the only things that we can do. It's safe to say that fan culture has reached a mainstream. And you know, I've been engrossed in fandom and fan culture for about 5 years now. And let me tell you, I have noticed some things. And I've noticed some trends, especially when it comes to opinions. You know, the things that everyone has, but no one can seem to handle. And I know what you're thinking. Is this really a 50-minute video talking about discourse on the internet? Yes. But first, we gotta define some stuff. The major idea that I want to touch on is the idea of the contrarian. A contrarian, according to Google, is a stock investor who deliberately decides to go against the prevailing wisdom of other investors. Obviously. Oh wait, that doesn't sound right. A contrarian in this context is a person who holds a contrary position, especially a position against the majority. Now, when I speak of the contrarian, I mean it as a neutral term. To be a contrarian is neither positive nor negative. There are people that can take contrarianism way too far, but put a pin in that. We can talk about it later. The reason one may have for being a contrarian may vary. For some, the piece of media has genuine flaws that might bog down the entire experience for them. For them, they might have a dissenting opinion that most people might not agree with. There is another group of contrarians which is much more countercultural. This group of people starts to dislike a piece of media, not so much for the merits and pitfalls of the piece itself, but to overexposure to something that they didn't have much interest in seeing in the first place. Toxic fan bases can also play a part in this, but in a more distinct way that we can talk about later. Let's put a pin in that too. Look at that. 2 pins? Twitter could never. Okay, let's frame this in the form of a sexy metaphor. Say you have a person who is not into apples. They don't actively dislike them, just a mild apathy towards them. Now, imagine suddenly they wake up and their house is absolutely filled with apples. Apples in the kitchen, apples on the ground, apples in the toilet. How did the apples get in the toilet? This person is going to grow to actively dislike apples now due to overexposure. And then they're gonna post about it on their Twitter, and then suddenly hashtag apples are over party starts trending. And then it becomes a whole thing, and man, we really do live in a society, don't we? This is what we call overexposure. Another common example of this is when a song blows up on the radio. You don't really care for it, but then everywhere you go, it's there. It's there when you're getting your groceries, going to the bank, going to Party City to pick up your custom-fitted clown costume, you know, everyday stuff. So, as a result, apathy grows into antipathy. There is no escape. And that's what social media feels like now. I think the perfect microcosm of this dynamic is the K-pop fandom. Now, I don't have time to unpack the K-pop discourse, and frankly, I'm not qualified to talk about that or the industry in any modicum of detail, but I don't know, maybe I'll talk about parasocial relationships another day. There are patterns that I've noticed when observing the behavior that groups within the K-pop fandom have originated. On paper, they're just like any group of fans. They enjoy the music and personalities of the members of their favorite group.
Do you play soccer?
No.
Because you're a keeper.
Now, it's no secret that the K-pop fandom is massive. Throw a rock in an office building and 9 times out of 10, you're gonna hit someone with a hot Korean boy avatar. Or girl. Oh, are there any non-binary K-pop stars? I don't want to imply that I hate K-pop and everyone who likes it. K-pop fans are a very passionate group, and I would never say, stop enjoying this thing. Stop enjoying it right now! Like, no. My intent is not to discuss the societal makeup of the K-pop fandom. I want to observe the culture that has grown to become a major part of the way the K-pop fandom? Cal-pop, like from California? Stream, I don't know, California girls? I want to observe the way that the K-pop fandom interacts with others in online spaces from the perspective of an outsider. That being said, let's talk about fan cams. Let's kill this love! For the uninitiated, there has been a trend that has come about in recent years for fans of a particular group to post short, edited videos under posts with a lot of interactions. From my understanding, they do this to show people their faves and promote their content. This isn't a K-pop exclusive thing. General stan Twitter of American pop stars do this. Whoa. Sound like a dog. However, in execution, fan cams have tended to do more harm than good in terms of achieving their goal. Let me use an example. Whoa, this post has a lot of notes. I wonder what insightful discussion awaits me in the replies. Oh, there's a lot of K-pop fan cams here. That's alright, I'll just scroll past. There's more. I'm sure it'll stop eventually, right? Am I a fan cam? You know what? Yeah, I think I hate K-pop. Of course, this is an exaggerated example, but the point I'm trying to illustrate here is that the intent of the fans is lost. They want to promote their faves by sharing content of them, but it ends up becoming more akin to an obstacle, having the opposite effect on Twitter bystanders. If under every post you see an unrelated K-pop fan cam and say you're indifferent to it, you're slowly going to resent what they represent, an obstacle. At that point, the quality or content of the media itself becomes irrelevant. They can be and are extremely skilled performers, but it doesn't matter to a person who dislikes them simply because they keep seeing them. This is further exacerbate. Wait, that sounds like another word, I'm not using that one. This is further exasperated depending on the content of the post they are tweeting under. If you're trying to look through the replies of a post about Cheez-Its, and suddenly the replies are all K-pop, that no good. K-pop not Cheez-It. Cheez-It snack for your little belly. I really wanted to see the Cheez-Its versus Cheese Nips discourse, but now I'm seeing idols dancing around on my screen, which last time I checked has nothing to do with which cheesy snack is better. It's Cheese Nips! Now that's a tame example, but say that you see fan cams under something that's much more serious, like on tweets about the election or a post announcing somebody's death. Context matters. Now I'm not just trying to point the finger at fan cams or K-pop. Fan cams themselves have evolved over time, actually. What initially began as a simple way to spread awareness of their favorite groups eventually grew to be more about self-expression, like a signature. Wearing your heart on your sleeve, if I may. And in recent years, the general public opinion of fan cams has actually been shifting to a more positive one. Get this. Fan cams have become weapons of mass destruction. They were being used during the peak of the Black Lives Matter protests in June to flood police hotlines that were intended to submit evidence of protesters with fan cams, burying anything that might potentially put an innocent protester at risk, and been used to flood potentially harmful hashtags on Twitter like hashtag All Lives Matter or hashtag I Stand with J.K. Rowling, burying toxic posts. This creates its own problem of actually causing the hashtag to trend even more, but the intent is there. And actually, more fandoms have adopted the format as a way to appreciate their own faves. Let me show you one of my favorites. Lois, if you're watching this, call me. Now, replace fan cams and K-pop with posts about Avatar, or the MCU, or Steven Universe, or any other popular thing that people on the internet just won't stop talking about. For media this popular, it doesn't matter what kind of social circle you're in. When they boom to such a level that their popularity is almost phenomenal, they become beloved by the general public, and will always eventually become a topic of discussion. Those who are apathetic or even straight up disliked the piece of media for whatever reason have their negative emotions somewhat amplified simply due to the exposure of something they wouldn't have given more than a passing thought. Some of them make YouTube videos. And here's the thing, being annoyed to overexposure is something that is perfectly natural. You know, we don't get to control our instinctual emotions, but what we can control is how we act on them.
When a person grows increasingly more contrarian, they have two options. One is to recognize the emotion is instinctual and understand that people enjoying something that I don't like has nothing to do with me. Or if they don't, they allow their internal emotions to manifest externally, affecting their cognition of K-pop fans and how they treat them.
You know, simply disliking K-pop isn't a bad thing.
The biggest issue with fan cams is the context in which they are being posted under. For people who are already tired of seeing them, with each and every instance, they're going to be more and more resentful. As a result, their cognition of fan cam posters distorts into something much more negative, and at its peak, can result in a toxic mindset. It's no longer fans celebrating their favorite thing, it's an active attack on your mental state.
Going around and saying, liking K-pop is not a personality trait, or dismissing what somebody has to say online just because they have a K-pop icon, that is a problem. When you allow the interests that someone has to reflect poorly on themselves simply because they like it, it ultimately comes down to, everyone likes this thing. I think this thing is bad. Therefore, everyone who likes this thing is bad.
It's a gross generalization of a group of people simply based on their preferences. If you're using K-pop fan cams to bully and harass K-pop fans, that isn't good. In fact, it's very bad.
And I'm not trying to generalize. I think it's an issue of vocal minorities.
Negative opinions are valid and important, and when constructive, can serve as a baseline for improvement. The simple fact of the matter is that if everyone liked the same things, individuality would cease to exist.
The inherent nature of consuming art is rooted in subjectivity.
So, someone's bound to have a different opinion than mine.
But the way social media tailors our experiences to us as individuals creates an echo chamber that suppresses the exposure of other opinions.
Anti-K-pop posts blow up to such a degree where it becomes extremely visible. Thanks to the algorithm focusing on numbers over content, it's going to make a K-pop fan feel terrible. The algorithm also works in the other way.
If you have a community based around a game,
you get the formation of a fandom.
Then the algorithm will recommend fans of that game as well. And this isn't a bad thing inherently, but the more audience members a piece of media gets, the amount of new critics rises concurrently with the amount of new fans.
But this criticism isn't always conveyed properly.
The line between legitimate criticism and contrarianism becomes extremely blurred. Those who are upset from a critical standpoint are grouped in with those who are subconsciously upset due to overexposure. And this is because both groups are subjected to the limitations of social media. When we talk normally, neurotypicals can observe things like tone of voice, facial expression, body language, among other things, to convey what they're trying to say. But due to text and character limitations, it's so much harder to convey what you're trying to say without compromising your overall message. In someone's mind, they might be thinking, in my opinion, this piece of media is deeply flawed, and the bad far outweighs the good to the point where it affects my overall enjoyment of the piece. However, because social media is so rapid fire, posts disappear in the blink of an eye, it's so much easier to just boil your opinion down to, I hate it. The original poster knows in their heart what they're feeling, but because of the way social media encourages us to express ourselves via extremes and reactionary language, the way we communicate is boiled down to its most reductive traits. When the original poster's opinion is conveyed poorly, an outsider can mistake their intent of criticism for contrarianism, and an audience member is more likely to believe that they're dunking on something they like without a good reason. So someone sees this person's post saying, I hate X. Anyone who interacts with that post is immediately going to start off negative. They're feeding off the energy of the original post. Because we, as people, are more inherently inclined to recognize negative information before anything else. This is called negativity bias, also known as positive-negative asymmetry. Negative events don't just happen, we have the tendency to dwell on these events. It's why the sting of an insult feels more intense than the joy from a compliment.
Rachel, you're so beautiful.
Thanks, Janie. So are you.
Maggie, you're such a bitch.
It's also why we dwell on negative, unconstructive criticism of things that we love. Let me paint a better picture of what negativity in fandom spaces does to someone's mind. Let's say your favorite Pokemon is, Castform. Yeah, that little guy. Castform is really important to you, and you love talking about it. But every time Castform is a topic of conversation in the main Pokemon community, the general attitude is, ew, Castform, or Castform is objectively trash. This elicits a negative reaction, because the things we are passionate about are intensely personal. And the thing about emotions is that they don't just stay static. Emotions are a lot like a river. One emotion flows into the next, and we can't control or stop the flow. A feeling that just might be sadness leads into feelings of isolation. It then starts to feel like you're the only Castform fan that has ever existed. And with seemingly everyone against you, you start to second guess yourself. And then your mind starts to race. Am I wrong for liking Castform in the first place? Does liking Castform make me a bad person? And as a result, one post can lead to depression. Going back to our initial example, there are 3 possibilities that this can go. The first possibility is one where everything goes completely smooth. A bystander asks the OP to explain themselves, and then they expand on their original idea, articulating their feelings in a constructive way. The responder, now with a clearer idea of the intent of the post, gains a much more clear understanding, and whether or not they agree or disagree, the responder can understand where the OP was coming from, and everyone walks away happy. Yay! But because the original post is using terminology with negative connotations, i.e. hate, the likelihood of the event becoming confrontational goes up as a result. Because remember, it's the bad things that stay in our minds. Instead of willing to go in with an open mind, a bystander is more likely to be defensive. And when people are more defensive, they're more likely to let their emotions cloud their judgment. Possible responses would be, wrong, but okay. Or, ha, get a load of this clown with the bad opinion. Oh, haha, look who has bad taste, XD. Or, if it's being mistaken for contrarianism, what the heck, you're only hating it because it's popular. Which makes the original poster angry, because 1, they start off combative, and 2, the idea that they don't understand where they're coming from is frustrating. So they decide to retort back. Possible responses from this point would be, at least I'm not a sheep who blindly consumes products.
Don't ask questions. Just consume product and then get excited for next products.
I'll talk more about this later, oh you bet I will.
Or another one would be, I don't listen to opinions from fans of this thing. And then you get to a point where nobody's listening to each other because they've already made assumptions about what the other person is trying to say. When an arguing party's goal is to make the other side look as bad as possible, as opposed to strengthening your own argument, that's when an argument is held in bad faith, and both people are trying to win. But because this situation is rooted in opinions, neither is more right than the other. Now, opinions can be wrong based on misinformation and a fundamental misunderstanding of the text, but that's a topic for another video. Now, what about the third possibility? Users might see the original post saying, I hate X, and another person might reply saying, I also hate X, and then another, and then another, and then another, and it gets to a point where the algorithm shows it to everybody's timelines, basically regurgitating this false representative for entire communities to see, and creating an echo chamber of negativity. All of the quote tweets and replies parrot the same opinion of the piece of media. And then this group of people who continue to corroborate and echo the same opinion come to the conclusion, oh, everyone must hate X. If everyone hates X, that must mean it's an objective fact that X is bad. It's okay to hate it. Everyone's doing it. This is an example of the logical fallacy argumentum ad populum. otherwise known as an appeal to the people, where an arguer misleadingly argues for the acceptance of some claim on the grounds that lots of people accept it. This is also closely related to the bandwagon fallacy, which we see a lot of on social media. In this case, hating something because everybody's doing it. You know when you're a kid and you want to do the same thing that all your friends are doing, and you're having a fight with your mom, and she gets frustrated, and then she says, if all your friends jumped on a cliff, would you do it too? And then you say yes, because you're 12, and you want to go back to playing like Pokemon or whatever.
When an opinion is echoed by so many different people and has garnered a high amount of engagement, people are more inclined to believe that that is what people think, or rather, should think.
Let me use an example that actually just happened earlier this month. Someone tweeted a video of a virtual YouTuber named Mori Calliope. She's a fictional content creator, of which the main appeal is the strength of her character design, as well as her personality.
Fuck it. So, unfortunate news, I ordered a kazoo, and something must have gone wrong, in the delivery. Because the kazoo that I received, there's fucking nothing in it. Like nothing. For the sound. Here, this is what you hear when you hear my kazoo. Hold on. Fucking F-wording nothing.
Alongside YouTube and streaming, she also releases music. She recently released an EP for free, which actually ended up hitting #1 on the iTunes charts. There's currently a discussion on how much the fact that she released her album for free influenced its success. This is a valid discussion. See, I didn't know anything about Calliope at all, really. But she ended up on my timeline, somehow. It all began with a single post. A user posted a clip of one of Mori's songs, Reaper Ka Rapper. Here's a little clip.
Crew, we are Hololive Myth. Let me show you how we do.
Did you really think I'd rap like that? Sorry, tough luck. Vocals gangster as can be, and I'm still mowing.
Alongside the video clip was a simple caption. Holy shit, this fucking sucks. Now, on its own, it's fine. A person is expressing their opinion on something that they didn't like. Nothing wrong with that. Twitter is a platform where impulsivity is rewarded. It's a place where I can tweet, "I'm peeing right now!" with very little consequences, in a matter of seconds. This also extends to opinions. People are absolutely free to state their own opinions on art. But when it's put out onto a public platform, how people perceive it is completely out of your control. It's death of the author, but stupid. Now, I watched it and I didn't agree. I thought it was pretty fire, actually. But when I looked through the replies and the quote tweets, it seemed like the overwhelming majority disagreed. Looking at the replies, there comes to be a problem. I'm trying to figure out why people don't like it, what the issue is. You know, if there are problems that I personally can't see, I like to make it a point to see different perspectives. And, you know, I'm looking through and scrolling through, and I couldn't figure out for the life of me what the legitimate criticism was. And then I realized there wasn't any here. Not really. Any that was there was buried under comments consisting of, "Oh no, cringe. There is no redeeming this. This is awful." And the worst one, the comments on the video act like it's the best thing they've ever heard. And it's just so sad. But I know based off of prior knowledge that VTubers are really, really popular, especially the ones associated with this specific label, Hololive. So I thought something was amiss. So I kept doom scrolling and scrolling, and I fell into a pit of despair from something that I didn't really even care about beforehand. Doom scrolling is also known as digital self-harm, intentionally seeking out content you know will upset you.
I'm generally a pretty empathetic person, so seeing a high volume of users making fun of people who simply enjoy this song filled me with a weird amount of anxiety. And I'm not even one of those fans.
I think it spawns from the initial language of the first post. This fucking sucks. From the get-go, it's like this post itself is a void. I know we like to believe that all posts are created equal, but interactions and numbers on social media create a post hierarchy. High volume of likes and retweets imply that some posts have more worth or validity than others. As of right now, the post has been taken down. but last I checked, it had a little under 4,000 quote replies and a little over 10k retweets. A post with so much unconstructive negative feedback serves as a pit of negativity, whether you're a fan of Mori's or not. And when the algorithm favors things like this, it becomes a non-consensual interaction. A fan of Mori's who might have really loved the song are likely to doubt themselves, spawning a storm of negative emotions. Bystanders are inclined to believe that this is the popular opinion, because according to the replies, everyone agrees. However, I believe that this is actually a vocal minority. A very loud vocal minority. Here's what I think. If this sentiment did reflect the majority opinion, it wouldn't have gotten to #1 on the chart. But from this post and its replies alone, you wouldn't be able to see that. Because when you think about it, the people who like or even love this song don't want to add to this specific thread. Why would they engage with this negative post when they can just as easily make their own, singing the song's praises? But the algorithm doesn't push the positive post. It pushes the negative one. Like, when I'm on Twitter, I see so many hot takes about things that I don't even care about, because it's what gets interactions. Whether the criticism is valid or invalid, and it's really difficult to tell whether it's a vocal minority or an overwhelming majority. And this kind of ties back to the idea of something being overrated and underrated. You know, what do those things even mean anymore? People who hate this song and say it's overrated operate under the assumption that a lot of people like this thing. I don't agree. Ultimately, I think one of the major contributing factors here is contrarianism. Now, considering the general public's evaluation in relation to the true quality of a piece is a process that can happen divorced from personal bias, but the way these terms are used more colloquially differ. There are a lot of people saying that Mori Calliope, even VTubers themselves, are overrated. Calling something overrated is just a roundabout way of saying, I don't think this piece of media deserves the praise it gets. In the same way, saying something is underrated means this thing should be getting more praise than it got. And both are relative to what one believes the general reception of it was. When you try to say something is underrated, it's in an attempt to lift it up. The difference is that when you say something is overrated, I think that the only thing that it accomplishes is trying to bring it down. And it feels like we see the term overrated more because of negativity bias. Because of these echo chambers and the distortions that follow, it's really hard to tell what the truth is.
I don't believe that every single one of these people are malicious. However, the term overrated has become a smokescreen for people to use when they don't like something popular. And that's perfectly fine on its own. But combined with the communication limitations that I discussed earlier, it contributes to a toxic environment. Contrarianism is also increased by the need to feel different, to feel special. Liking the popular thing means that you are just like everybody else. So our initially lukewarm feelings about something slowly increase in intensity the more that we see it. This is very reminiscent of the hipster mindset. I'm different. I don't like K-pop. Because K-pop is popular, liking it means you are sheeple. The things that I like are exclusively good. Have you ever heard people say that nuance is dead on the internet? Yeah, this is it. Upon witnessing this long thread of bad faith criticism, a person who is a big fan of Mori will undergo the spiral of emotions that I discussed earlier. This happens when you give too much stake into what other people think, especially bad faith actors. On both sides, you get people without the tools to communicate effectively. What's preventing us from communicating better, like the first instance that I described earlier, is the assumption that people that don't think the same way you do are directly in opposition to our own beliefs. I like this, and I don't like this, are not inherent enemies, they're opposites. Contrasting opinions can provide for great discussion, but we see that discussions aren't being had anymore because of these communication limitations and the knee-jerk reaction to assume that they are just being a jerk.
a lot of times people, and most importantly social media, can disproportionately represent reality. In my personal life, this is how I felt with the movie Frozen for the longest time. I had felt like I couldn't look through discussions or comments about any other Disney movie online, because in my mind it felt inevitable for someone to say, "Oh, this movie is so much better than Frozen. My favorite Disney princess deserves so much more attention than Frozen." And you know, opinions and criticism are really, really important. I cannot stress that enough. Who am I to tell you what you can and can't like? You know, people have the right to post whatever they want on their own profiles. Okay, let me slow down and give a little bit of background on the situation. And elaborate, just a tiny bit. What we're witnessing here is an example of subjective opinion on art being mistaken for objective fact, like we saw in the Calliope situation earlier. We're seeing echo chambers being developed, and unpopular opinions and minority voices are either not being heard or choosing not to engage. An incorrect assumption is made when people believe that Frozen is indeed popular. It's popular in the sense that financially it did very, very well, and it was a huge success within its core demographic being young girls. But little girls aren't on Twitter. So everyone outside of that demographic will have a different perspective on the film, one that is much more harsh. A common sentiment is that Frozen gets much more attention than their favorite Disney movie. Tangled is the one that gets brought up the most, as it's the Disney princess film that came directly before Frozen, and it shares a similar art style. When Tangled released, Rapunzel was added to the Disney Princess collection of toys and merchandise. Anna and Elsa were originally intended to join them as well. However, Frozen was such a phenomenon that it was able to stand on its own and remain successful as a brand independent of the other princesses. This led to Frozen being much more visible on release, whereas Rapunzel was delegated to remain with the other princesses. And the Disney company, money hungry as it is, produced a high volume of merchandise. We're witnessing a culture clash between mainstream capitalistic marketing and general public opinion. Contrarian dissenters of Frozen, operating under the assumption that the film is overrated, base their assumptions off corporate success as well as iconography.
This Blogspot post in 2014 perfectly captures the general attitude of Frozen contrarians at the time. There's this film called Frozen. Have you heard of it? Probably not. It's not like every child everywhere is singing its songs non-stop or purchasing all related merchandise. This movie is ridiculous. And I don't mean that the movie itself is, I mean that everyone needs to shut up about it already.
The intensity of the marketing and the merchandising are contributing factors for this contrarian mindset. However, in my experience as a Frozen fan, and others may be able to corroborate this too, the countercultural backlash of Frozen was much more visible and much more common than legitimate fandom for the franchise. In a nutshell, it was popular to hate Frozen. Luckily though, that vitriol has slowly died down over the years, especially with the release of Frozen 2, which was actually pretty well received. However, back in the mid-2010s, no one would bat an eye if you said Frozen was overrated or it sucks or blah 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 blah. The legitimate constructive criticism was drowned out by the contrarianistic, bad faith actors. I might even call them haters. As a result, Frozen fans were afraid to speak up out of fear of backlash. This is why you may see less public fan content outside of Frozen specific circles. Frozen contrarians often point to Tangled as being more deserving of the attention. And we've already seen what happens with echo chambers. Everyone starts to take it as fact. I think this is where this false misconception comes in, because at the time all they saw was Frozen merch. They assumed that Tangled didn't get any attention at all. However, Tangled never really stopped being popular. It got 2 movies, an animated short, and 3 seasons of an animated series, with quite the dedicated fanbase. And it's a very successful brand. Y'all are eatin'. This One Gotta Go post is a microcosm of how popular discussion in regards to Frozen often plays out. We face a contradiction. People operate under the assumption that Frozen is overrated. Calling something overrated implies popularity. However, at the same time, a population of people assume that it's impossible for anyone to like the movie. If it's a popular opinion that Tangled is unpopular, what does that mean? Where are we? Leave what you think it means in the comments below. This has caused a small but ultimately insignificant feud between Tangled and Frozen fans. There are people who like both. I'm one of them. However, Frozen and Tangled solidarity posts aren't really gonna get noticed by the algorithm. The posts that blow up are going to be the Tangled fans that push down Frozen, and the echo chambers that follow agreeing with them. Frozen fans from this point on are expected to either remain silent or will react to defend themselves, discrediting Tangled in the process. And ultimately, we get another thread of toxicity and badness. One of my personal core philosophies is that every piece of media is someone's favorite. For every opinion, there is an equal and opposite opinion. Ultimately, it's subjective. Neither one is more right than the other. But the things that we love are so intensely personal that, in my experience, it affects us quite a bit. Let's be vulnerable for a sec. Woohoo! If you were talking to me in 2015, 2016, you couldn't convince me that there were legitimate issues with Frozen. And trust me, there are. Specifically in terms of pacing and how the success of the movie changed the future of the entire Disney company. I understand all of this, but seeing such vitriol come from the other side, feeling like anything that I have to say would be invalidated because I like this franchise, I was terrified of admitting that I was a Frozen fan, because I didn't want to put it out there and risk appearing as lesser because of my opinion. The Frozen fandom became a solace for me. But then this brought another problem. It's subconsciously easier for us to lump in constructive, legitimate criticism with the bad faith actors. When you flat out deny that there are any issues with the thing that you like, you do yourself a disservice, and your cognition becomes distorted. If the popular opinion is that the thing that you like is bad, you will want to be a contrarian and double down on your beliefs. Out of spite, it's possible for you to like it even more, and it's kinda like sunk cost fallacy adjacent. However, fan communities can become an echo chamber as well, especially when it comes to things that are unpopular. If a fandom is a safe haven for you, discussion and criticism of the thing that you're into may be flat out unwelcomed. I let myself believe that everybody with criticisms of Frozen were bad faith actors. Don't get me wrong, there definitely are bad faith actors, there always are. But in the process, when I eliminated the legitimate criticism of Frozen, those other opinions didn't exist. I did to them exactly what they did to me. As a result, I dehumanized or even vilified people with misgivings of Frozen. And it's still something I'm working on, learn behaviors and stuff. It's not perfect, but the only way that it's going to get better is through criticism. The internet doesn't represent real life. You don't see people acting like this outside of the internet. So why? Why does this happen? Well, I think a lot of it ties back to identity. Let me use an example. I feel like I've said that a lot already. Let's say you have a brand new Twitter account. Blank, it's an egg. This new user tries to interact and mingle with people. But because their profile is devoid of anything that defines them, they basically don't exist on the internet. So, what do? Well, they list the media that they're into. Maybe they'll make their icon their favorite character, or maybe even name themselves after them. And suddenly you're not a blank account, a nobody anymore. You are a fandom account. And the media you like becomes intrinsically part of who you are and how you're perceived. On the internet, you are defined by what you tweet, your followers, who you interact with, and most importantly, what you like. Someone who was previously unheard has suddenly been given a voice. And this isn't a bad thing, it's actually quite beautiful. But with fandoms come an issue. Let's say you're, what's something weird? Diary of a Wimpy Kid fan account. Your icon is Roderick, rightfully so, of course, and you're surrounded by a large group of people that share your love and passion for Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Let's say this manifests in fanworks, fan fiction. Is there a Diary of a Wimpy Kid fan fiction? You know what? I don't want to know. And for a lot of people, Diary of a Wimpy Kid is an escape. If Diary of a Wimpy Kid is a source of happiness, new friends, and company, you're going to value it as intrinsically part of who you are. And this escapism can often become a coping mechanism to escape the hardships of our real, tangible lives. While this fandom of Diary of a Wimpy Kid has undeniably brought you great and profound joy, it also creates a bubble. Because Diary of a Wimpy Kid is so much more to you than just a piece of art. It's something that changed your life. And despite Diary of a Wimpy Kid being all those things to you, it's still a subjective piece of art. And like Mozart used to say, all art is subject to criticism. Trust me, he told me himself. Criticism is a threat to that bubble. A bubble that stems from the very thing that you built your entire online identity around. So when someone sees legitimate Diary of a Wimpy Kid criticism, maybe they'll see Diary of a Wimpy Kid is garbage and here's why video. It feels personal. So we feel the need to defend ourselves. We decide to come up with reasons why they're wrong. Oh, you probably didn't even read/watch it. Or maybe you hate the book because you hate minorities. See? We'll do anything to preserve our bubble because our identity is so intrinsically linked to this thing that we love. When we observe the world outside of our bubble, it hurts us. And so we retreat into our safe haven, where nothing is wrong, everything is fine. There's nothing wrong with Diary of a Wimpy Kid and the fandom. That's where that line of thinking comes from. You are criticizing a piece of media. This piece of media has shaped me to become who I am. Therefore, you are criticizing me. But remember, you are not what you like. You are a three-dimensional person who exists. Actually, you know what? Don't verify that with a philosopher. You'll convince yourself that you don't exist and you'll be right where you started. You are a three-dimensional person with many layers. But because of fandom, it doesn't feel that way. You know, you have multiple facets of yourself and your personality and how you are, but it feels like on the internet, you're just a Diary of a Wimpy Kid fan. Yeah, it might make you feel great, amazing even. But if you willfully ignore the bad or, God forgive, problematic parts of what you enjoy, that's not good. Like, I told myself that everyone who hated Frozen was just annoyed at the overexposure, or they hated Let It Go for no reason, or they didn't understand the film. It might be tempting to just double down and sink into yourself and just avoid it all. And a big part of being a responsible consumer is being able to acknowledge and be critical of the problems within media. And just because it's not perfect doesn't mean that you have to stop loving your favorite thing. In fact, loving it despite its flaws might help you appreciate it even more, in my experience. It's media literacy, man. I'm really passionate about this situation because I've lost friends over this. And I want to prevent the same thing from happening to any of you. Because it's important and, frankly, healthy to have opinions that differ from your friends, whether it be intentional or malevolently. Social media is ripe with misinformation and misrepresentation. And when we're not critical of all that, we're ignorant. And ignorance leaves us vulnerable. If it's something you love, don't let it go. Let it take you to beautiful places. But I think it's important to have something that fulfills you, that you define yourself with, that is independent from your favorite movie, or game, or show, or, Quibi.
I'm fully naked under here. I think that's the hardest part about being a judge. It's so...
Okay, maybe not that one. Here's what I think. I think every single one of us has been a contrarian at some point. Yes, even you watching this right now. You can't see it, but I'm pointing at you. I think we all have that thing that we just don't understand or are tired of seeing around. And that's valid. It's a natural feeling. But as long as we don't let it affect our perception, I think we can gain a better understanding of each other, especially during this harsh time and on platforms that seem to encourage the opposite. I'm an optimist. I believe that we can push ourselves to be the very best that we can be. Is that naive? Maybe. But I think we can do it. One thought at a time. So we've reached the end of this thing, and I hope that you've learned something from this video. Have you resonated with any of the experiences that I've described? What's your favorite thing that people don't seem to understand? Let me know in the comments below so I can artificially inflate the stats of this video. You know, I don't even like apples.